And Ernie is our board member who just stepped down, so it's fun to see his name. Fun to see that he's still joining us. And let me hand it over to Mike and Tom. I'll let them introduce themselves because they know more about them than I do. I just met them. Gosh, was it just a few days ago? Ji-Young Park, who's one of our representatives from the Silver Lake Neighborhood Council, brought them to our advocacy committee meeting. And they are with LA for Democracy Now! And they are doing some really, really exciting work that I think has enormous potential to change the way politics work in LA. So I'd love to hand it over to Mike and Tom. And if you folks can introduce yourselves more fully and dive in. And then let me add, I should add before we start, I like it when a PowerPoint, they're going to do a PowerPoint presentation, and I like it when it gets chopped up a little bit with questions and comments. I realize that not everybody likes that as much as I do. But so what I'm going to experiment and what I'm going to try to ask is, if you have a question or comment and you think it might not be addressed and you think you're asking it at the right time, please feel free to ask. But if you think it might make more sense to wait until the end of the presentation, you can do that as well. I hope that makes sense, and we'll experiment. And Ji-Young, did you want to say anything? I just giving you credit for bringing Tom and Mike to us.
No, just thank you for agendizing this for this meeting, and I'm glad to bring this to as many folks as I can.
Yeah, I was so excited that Ji-Young brought this to us because I did not know about it, and I'm really excited to talk about the potential implications for sustainability. Okay, so now I will hand it over to Mike and Tom.
Great. Lisa, thank you so much. Also, Ji-Young, thank you for the introduction. My name is Mike Drashkovich, he, him. I'm from Los Angeles, also co-lead of LA for Democracy Vouchers. We're the group presenting today. Our goal as an organization is to help create a more open and equitable campaign finance system for Los Angeles City. I was also a former student representative on my neighborhood council in Valley Village, so I'm a deep believer in this radical democratic, lowercase d, democratic project we have here in Los Angeles, and appreciate all the work y'all are doing to advance transformative ideas through the system. So thank you again for being here. Tom's going to Tom, you want to introduce yourself, and then I can give an overview of where we're headed?
Yeah, sure. Great to be here again. Thanks, Lisa. I see some familiar faces from a week ago, so apologies. You're going to see largely the same set of slides, but hopefully this can be exciting for everyone else. I'm Tom Lekowski. I also use he, him pronouns. I've been working on campaign finance for several years now, really dedicated to this as a project that is not just good in its own right to fight corruption and special interest power, but can also unlock a lot of other reforms for us. So anything we want to do on racial justice or on climate, often those reforms get blocked by the sitting interests. And so that's part of why I'm passionate about this. Yeah, excited to talk about democracy vouchers tonight.
Great. And before Tom goes into our presentation, I just want to make note of two imperatives that have guided our work from the get-go. The first is what we call our social justice imperative. So good governance ideas like democracy vouchers, ranked choice voting, proportional representation have long been siloed and kind of disconnected from the priorities we all fight for, whether sustainability or racial justice, gender equity. Part of our work is making those connections explicit and at the forefront of our research. So you'll see us through the presentation try to reframe it from good governance into just governance. The second imperative that we brought to our work, we call a participatory imperative. So Tom and I and our advisors, we're just a handful of folks. As fellow citizens, it would be irresponsible for us to make the decision about what this policy should look like. So we've actually compiled a list of 30 questions that we want to bring to a coalition of community groups and activists in advance of our 2024 ballot initiative to decide what the policy looks like together. So those are the two guiding imperatives. And with that, I'll hand it over to Tom.
Awesome.
Can folks who are not speaking please mute because it's echoing?
Yeah, I just muted Aurora. I think it was her actually.
Yes, thank you for that. Hopefully we can, yeah, feel free to unmute and jump in with questions. But other than that, yeah, I'll stay muted. And hopefully my internet connection also holds up throughout this. I was having some worrying signs with people buffering a moment ago. So hopefully everyone can now see my screen. And I'm gonna dive in here. So again, we are LA for Democracy Vouchers. And so basically I want to take you through two things today. First of all, I just want to look at the existing campaign finance system in Los Angeles and explain what we think the problems are. And then second, I'll introduce the concept of democracy vouchers and why this is a good idea. So first, the existing system, we did a deep dive into the last set of city races. So that was the 2020 LA city races. And so of course there were 7 city council and 4 school board races in 2020. And all told, we're talking about around $32 million in political spending. So the first question is, where did that money come from? So this is where I imagine people think the money came from. So of course, this is Los Angeles here. These different dots are different zip codes. So, you know, some places donated a little more, some a little less. But in fact, here's where the money came from. All across the United States. So there's a decent chunk from LA, but there's, you know, this giant dot in Utah. There's all this stuff on the East Coast. There's Northern California, all these different parts of the country spending money in LA elections. So just to break that down, all told, a majority of the money, in fact, about 70% of the money in the 2020 races came from outside Los Angeles. To highlight a few top zip codes, the single highest giving zip code in 2020 was Park City, Utah. Not even in LA, not even in California. It was one donor in Utah who gave nearly $3 million to various PACs, generally supporting charter candidates in school board races. Another top zip code, Bentonville, Arkansas, which I had not heard of prior to doing this work, but if you know it as anything, you know it is the home of the headquarters of Walmart. So again, these are folks from across the country that don't have a political stake in LA's elections, but may have a big financial stake in our elections, and so are spending money. So again, breaking this down, 70% of the money came from outside the city. But even of what remains, a big portion of that came from special interests that, you know, happen to be our special interests. But we're just left with these two sections here, about 17% of the money that came from either people who live in Los Angeles or from the matching funds program, which I'll get into that, but that is the goal of the matching funds program is to help small donors boost their power. And so it's helping a little bit, but all told, this is still just 70% of the money.
Tom, I am going to interrupt. Brian just asked an interesting question in the chat that I do think is appropriate for now. Brian, are you okay just asking it with you? Yeah, go ahead.
Sure. Are we sure that these people also don't have a residence in LA, but they designate Utah or Bentonville as their primary residence?
Yeah, so some may have a history with Los Angeles, right? Some may have used to live here. But ultimately, when you're filling out the form, you know, you get to pick what you're marking down, right? So these are folks that didn't choose to put their LA residence, if they do have one. So yeah, ultimately, we're a little bit limited based on the data we have and what conclusions we can draw. But we can be pretty sure that these are not, you know, your ordinary small dollar folks, you know, just contributing a little bit of money to a city council candidate. Yeah, great question. And again, I can't really see the chat while I'm presenting. So Lisa, if folks have questions, feel free to just jump in, or if folks just want to unmute and ask, feel free to do that.
And I'm hoping that Muriel can also help monitor the chat for me, because sometimes I cannot keep up with it.
Great, yeah, that's perfect. So again, we're talking about 17% of the money here. And so already that's not great. But we wanted to look further at this and say, where did this come from within the city? You know, is this a representative sample of the city? And we found that it's not. So on the left here, of course, this is LA. This map breaks down Los Angeles by race. So you can see the darker orange zip codes have a higher percent people of color, lighter orange, higher percent white people. The map in the middle here is donations per capita. And basically these are exact opposites.
You guys.
So you can see the regions with the highest percent people of color were often the least money. And most of the money that came, when it came from within LA City at all, it was coming from these wealthy white neighborhoods. And LA is 70% people of color. So this is, vastly disproportionate, not representative of the city as a whole. So this is an overarching view of where the money's coming from, but we also want to show how is this affecting who gets elected, because we have lots of studies, lots of reports at the national or state level that show that the existing campaign finance system benefits white people, it benefits men, and it benefits incumbents. And so we wanted to see how is that ringing true in Los Angeles? And so we looked at the last 100 years of city council races. So in this chart, each person who gets elected to the city council gets a dot. And so we've broken down new members on the council by decade. And so we just wanted to ask some basic questions. So first we broke it down by race. So you can see in the early decades, almost exclusively white people on the council. But even in recent years, disproportionately white for a city that's 70% people of color. By gender, the picture is even starker. Again, early years, all men, but even in recent years, basically all men. And of course, currently the council is 12 men and 3 women. And of course, LA is about 50-50. So again, not representative. By incumbency, we see a similar story. We looked at just the last 50 years this time. There have been 65 new members on the council in the last 50 years. 57 of them ran in an open seat, so they didn't have to worry about facing an incumbent. There were only 8 people in the last 50 years who actually succeeded at defeating an incumbent. And so all 3 of these stories, the fact that it's mostly white folks, mostly men, and mostly incumbents winning their races, all of these stories are not just about campaign finance. There are lots of things that go into this, but we do know that the existing fundraising system benefits those folks. It benefits white men and it benefits incumbents. So the big question is, what can we do about this? So here are 3 ideas that get discussed. Number 1 is to end Citizens United. And so for those who aren't familiar, this was a Supreme Court decision in 2010 that essentially opened the floodgates and allowed a greater ability for special interests to spend money in our elections. And ending Citizens United is a great idea, and something that Mike and I fully support and are on board with, but it's a long-term fight, and it's not something that LA City can do on its own. It would take either a constitutional amendment or a new Supreme Court and Citizens United. So we don't want to put all of our
Can you give a
hopes on
little
that.
bit more background on Citizens United, please, for folks?
Yeah, sure. So essentially the decision, previously there were things in place, you have contribution limits, and maybe rich folks can afford to donate a little bit more than other folks to candidates. But Citizens United said that now all of a sudden you can, you may be limited in what you can give to an individual candidate, but if you're a wealthy individual or a wealthy corporation, you can spend money via super PACs, where you can essentially spend unlimited amounts of money and have it technically be not connected to the candidate. So you can say, oh, we're not working with this candidate. We just happen to be running ads that are supporting them, all the way up to election day. And so previously that was not allowed. And so this basically makes it possible for special interests to spend way more money than they previously could have to support the candidates they want to get elected. And so again, this is bad. This is not something that we should have. But getting rid of it is probably a decades-long fight. So we want to try and find, what other reforms can we do to make the system better, given that, this is not something that LA City can fix on its own. The second idea is 100% public financing. So the idea being, okay, maybe candidates need some money to fund their campaigns. What if we just ban all private contributions and give public money instead? But again, the Supreme Court says this is unconstitutional. You can't just ban private contributions. People have a right to donate. The third idea that gets discussed is matching funds, which I mentioned a few slides ago. And this is actually a program that LA has now. So if you're a small donor giving to city council or citywide candidates, your donations get matched 6-to-1. So if you give $10 to a city council candidate, the city will give them an additional $60. And essentially the goal of that is to make your small donations matter a little bit more, so that the candidate might spend more time looking for $10 donations and less looking for $1,000 donations. But again, this is clearly not addressing the full problem, right? We're seeing that it's a small share of the overall money. And what we're seeing is it's mostly wealthy white folks whose donations are getting matched in the first place. So it's a positive step, but it's not really addressing the problem. So our solution is called democracy vouchers. And the idea is simply to give every city resident money in the form of these vouchers that they can donate to campaigns. So this is a picture of one of Seattle's democracy vouchers from the 2017 city elections. And so you can see space here to fill in the candidate name that you support, and then you sign in date. And then when you're done, you return your voucher to the city. And they make a record of it and send the candidate a check. So this does a few things. First of all, to just state the obvious, with democracy vouchers, anyone can donate. So you no longer need to be wealthy. You no longer need to have any disposable income at all. You can literally be anyone. There have been cases in Seattle of candidates fundraising with the homeless population in Seattle, which is of course something that would never happen under the existing campaign finance system. Candidates don't even usually try and get the homeless population to vote. But all of a sudden in Seattle, everyone you talk to is potentially worth $100 because they get 4 of these $25 vouchers. And so all of a sudden that's worth it for a candidate. I kind of just touched on this, but a second point is that with vouchers, any network is a fundraising network. So we were talking about how the existing system benefits white men and benefits incumbents. A big part of the reason for that is that those are often the folks with the most people they can call to write big checks, right? If you're an incumbent, maybe you've been in this for decades, you know a lot of folks, you know the big donors. You can just get on the phone with people and get those $1,000 checks. But if you're someone who's new to this, or if you're someone with a background in advocacy or in organizing, maybe you worked as a teacher, you have good ideas potentially. You have, an important perspective that should be represented in government, but you don't have any useful fundraising connections. If you've worked as a teacher, you probably don't have a lot of folks you can call to give you $1,000. Well, with democracy vouchers, all of a sudden you can literally just knock on doors in your neighborhood, right? You can talk to any connections that you do have, and that can actually be a good fundraising strategy. Final point here is that, again, this is a Supreme Court requirement that we can't force candidates to use democracy vouchers. So what we do instead, and what Seattle did, is that this is an optional program for candidates. So what that means, though, is that if candidates choose to participate and want to take vouchers, they have to follow some extra rules. So for example, Seattle decreased the private contribution limits candidates, essentially to prevent double dipping, right? If you're taking vouchers, we don't want you to also be taking $1,000 checks.
Devon, I'm going to mute you.
Was that a question, or was that just
I don't know, but I'm trying to mute him.
Okay, no worries. Anyway, so lower contribution limits. Seattle also put overall spending limits on voucher campaigns. And the final point is that voucher candidates in Seattle are required to attend public debates, which is something you normally can't do. A city can't just require candidates to show up to debates. And that's a big problem in some places, that incumbents feel impervious and they just ignore their challenger and never show up to a debate. So with vouchers, you can actually require that. So I'm going to dive into some of the results from Seattle here. First, just an overall look. Again, Seattle passed this in 2015 with a ballot initiative. Support came largely from the groups you might expect. So we're talking about Democrats, unions, progressives. There wasn't really an active opposition campaign. It was, big business didn't love it. Republicans didn't love it. Some of the sitting city council members publicly supported it because they felt like they had to, but privately they actually hated it because essentially they understood this was going to make it easier for people to challenge them. So anyways, it did pass and was used in the 3 election cycles since, so 2017, 2019, and 2021. So I've got 4 slides left here. I'm going to dive into the results. So first of all, donors in Seattle are more diverse today than before vouchers. So prior to vouchers, Seattle had many of the same problems in LA, where it was wealthy folks, it was white folks who were doing most of the contributing. One stat that I love to mention is that one of the best predictors of whether someone was going to donate in Seattle before vouchers was whether or not their home had a view of the water. And if it did, they were a likely donor, and otherwise probably not. And so of course, that means that those were wealthy folks, also disproportionately white, right? Today with vouchers, that's no longer true. Donors are more diverse by race, by income, more diverse by age, and they're more spread out throughout the city. Another point is how this has affected candidates. So building equity and getting a more diverse field of candidates was a big goal of the program. So Seattle spent a lot of money in public awareness, especially in communities that traditionally did not make as many contributions or did not vote at the same rates. And that really worked. So in 2021, this last cycle, Seattle had its most diverse mayoral field ever, and democracy vouchers were a big part of that. And so here's one quote that a mayoral candidate gave us on his use of the voucher program. He said, "My campaign wouldn't be able to persist without the democracy voucher program, which allowed me, a Black, Latino, first-time candidate with zero net worth, to hit the program's primary cap first," essentially meaning his primary campaign at least was fully funded up to what he needed. And so this is a game changer, right? This means that people who previously might not have had the connections to fundraise or might not have had a traditional background of someone who runs for office, all of a sudden they can run for office too and can have really successful, well-funded campaigns. One question you could have is, okay, this is great and all, but aren't the special interests always going to have more money? And the answer is they probably will always have more money. And so there was kind of a test case in the 2019 Seattle City Council races. That year, the city had been debating a head tax that they wanted to use to fund homeless services. And this was going to tax companies like Amazon, some other companies based out of the city. So of course, Amazon didn't like this and spent, you can see here, they already spent $1 million. They drop another $1 million in from this one Seattle Times article. And that was just from Amazon. All told, there was 10 million plus in outside spending in the city council races that year. So essentially these companies that didn't like this one tax wanted to replace the entire city council. And so this was a big question, right? If you're a candidate running with democracy vouchers, are you going to be able to stand up to this and win despite all of this money coming into your race? And the answer was yes. In 2019, out of 7 city council races, 6 winners used vouchers, and only 1 Amazon-backed candidate won in 2019. And you can see the headline here: Amazon's big spending on Seattle City Council races appears to backfire. And so basically the takeaway was Amazon did have more money than the voucher candidates, but ultimately it didn't matter because the voucher candidates had enough money to get their message out. So if you have zero money, if you just can't fundraise at all, you're not going to succeed as a candidate. But if you have some money, enough to, send a mailer, run an ad, hire some staff members, all of a sudden you can get your message out. And even if you're still being dramatically outspent, at least you have a shot. You can give voters a shot to make up their money. That's what we saw in Seattle. One more slide here, and then we will, open it up to questions. So I've covered some of the ways this impacts who runs for office, who donates, campaign finance. But there's one final big effect of this that often gets ignored, and that's how it changes local political culture. So these pictures are of a guy in Seattle named Jakari Brown. He is formerly homeless himself, but in 2021, he became one of the top fundraisers in the city of Seattle. Of course, he was a democracy voucher fundraiser. You can see him here talking to some folks on the street. And here's his pitch. He says, "You maybe got a second or two to help the homeless. This is the free democracy voucher program where everyone in the city gets $100 to donate to a campaign." And so basically he was working for candidates who, he believed had good homeless policies and was just going around making that pitch to different voters, to different folks in the city, and getting them engaged with the program. And so this is big for him as someone, who normally would probably not be hired as a fundraiser. But all of a sudden has this tremendous ability to connect with just ordinary people, is good at canvassing, and is suddenly very effective for these campaigns. So it's big for him, but it's also big for the folks that he talks to, because studies show that when non-voters or low propensity voters use their vouchers, they become 6 to 10 times more likely to actually go vote. And this is a dramatic increase, right? Normal canvassing, we see maybe a 5% increase in voter turnout, if that, if you're lucky. But what's happening here is these are folks who previously may have said, the politicians, they're all corrupt, they never actually get anything done. They don't care about me. But all of a sudden, someone is at your door, a candidate or someone from a campaign is at your door, showing that they do care about you. And what's more, you're put in a position of power because they're asking you for something. They're asking you for your vouchers. And so all of a sudden, folks are feeling more bought in, more connected with the political system, and become that much more likely to actually go vote on election day. All right, so I'm going to stop the share here. And again, we can open it up for some questions.
And before we do that, I want to say, Muriel, are you going to be changing people's screen names?
Yeah.
Okay, so
Can you change
we're
me
going to
to
have,
host?
I'm sorry?
Can you change me to host so I could do that?
Oh, I did that a while ago.
Oh goodness, okay.
So we're going to be voting on, I was going to say democracy vouchers, but that's not correct. We're going to be voting on a couple of building decarbonization motions this evening. So Muriel will be changing, and I don't know if Lorraine is here, but Muriel will be changing your names to reflect whether or not you are a voter. So don't freak out when you see your name change. So yeah, folks, yeah, there were a lot of great questions in the chat. If you want to just ask them out loud, please raise your hand. We can try to get to them, but I will start with the raised hands. Ji Young, and it doesn't have to be a question, it can be a comment, of course. Oops, Ji Young, okay, are you going ahead? Is she having maybe she's not.
Sorry.
Oh, there you are. Okay.
Yeah, so I got on board with this because I saw firsthand how bills, really great bills, were not even getting passed through the committees in our legislative bodies. And if you looked at the people who were voting against these bills that we need, and a lot of them were environmental, if you look at their donors, you can see that they have a lot of money. A lot of the money that was donated to their campaigns is from people who have a vested interest in opposing these bills. So, for example, the setback bill, the oil setback bill that was in the last legislative cycle, it died in committee. Another bill was a bill to have, I think it was to ban corporate money. It was to ban corporate money in elections, because there's actually already a parallel bill in the federal that applies to federal candidates. We just don't have one for state candidates. And that bill died in committee. A lot of the big environmental bills in the last election cycle did not pass. And this is why. And campaign finance and fair elections, unfair elections, are the bottleneck to so many of the things that we actually need, whether it's environmental, housing, redistribution of wealth, so many things. So I fully support this.
Thank you. And Glenn, and I should have said this earlier, before you speak, if you can introduce yourself, maybe say your neighborhood council or other affiliation, so folks know a little bit more about you. Glenn.
Oh, I can say that. I'm a Silver Lake Neighborhood Council governing board member at large. And I am also a liaison to the Neighborhood Council Sustainability Alliance, as well as an organizer. I should also disclose that I'm also an organizer with LA Democracy Vouchers and Public Bank LA.
And can I disclose the other interesting thing about you of late?
Sure. I just don't want to be here in that capacity, but you can definitely share that.
She's also running to be a judge, so she will be on your ballot, I think. So she can, anyway, lots going on, and she can be experiencing this whole issue from a couple different perspectives. Glenn.
Thanks, Glenn Bailey, Encino and North Regis councils. Just a question on approximate cost. I realize the societal cost, but in terms of the actual out-of-pocket type costs, any idea what that might be?
Yeah, so our estimate is about $15 million a year for the city. That's based off of Seattle's program, which costs 3 million a year. So basically, we just scaled that up.
I'm sorry, 15.
Yeah, 15 million.
Okay, thanks.
Niche.
Hi, Ms. Krishnamurthy, Sustainability Liaison for the Downtown LA Neighborhood Council. Thanks for the presentation or the interesting concept. Question is, one thing that I didn't understand was whether if a city council member wants to, or a candidate wants to take part of this, like, do they have the choice? Like, sorry, do they, yeah, like, so I guess somebody a candidate cannot take part of this program and still receive contributions from outside member or, from special interest or whatever. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is correct. And this is the thing, is that we are hamstrung by some of these decisions, like Citizens United and like others. So we're not really able to prevent, if a candidate doesn't want to participate in vouchers, we can't really stop them from working with the existing system. What we want to do instead is just create a path for someone to challenge them and have that person at least be well funded. And then also that person at least can make the case to the community, hey, they're taking all this special interest money. I'm taking your vouchers. I'm the one that you can actually trust.
But a candidate can only choose one or the other campaign financing mechanism. Is that right?
Yeah, essentially. I mean, the way Seattle's done it, which we would largely want to copy, is that, if you choose to take vouchers, you can still take some private money, but it has to be only small contributions. And so we would also say, if you're going to take vouchers, no PAC money, no corporate money, and candidates would literally sign an agreement with the city before they were allowed to redeem any vouchers. And so that would be, you're not going to take corporate PAC money. You're only going to take contributions up to some small dollar amount plus vouchers. You're going to attend public debates, things like that. And they would literally have to sign that at the start of the election cycle.
All right, Lorraine.
Hi, Lorraine Lundquist, NCSA board member, and also a former candidate, so I'm familiar with the election process. Are you proposing this for in lieu of the current matching fund system? So abolishing the current matching fund system and using this instead?
Yeah, I mean, in theory, they could coexist. It's ultimately a question of cost. We think that this is better because it includes more folks, right? $0 times 6 is still $0, whereas this could include everyone. But ultimately, Mike mentioned at the beginning, we have this list of questions for the broader community. That's one of those questions. We like this program. We think this would really help Los Angeles. That doesn't mean we have to get rid of matching funds. In theory, they could coexist. So that's kind of TBD.
And how does it compare in cost to the current matching funds?
It's a little bit more expensive than matching funds. I think matching funds is maybe 3 to 5 million a year, and this would be closer to 15 per year. So it's an increase in that. Ultimately, though, it's still a small percentage of the overall budget. We're talking about like 0.1% of the city budget. So it's definitely something that LA can afford.
Thank you.
Lionel. Or Lionel. We've been emailing all week, but I don't know how to pronounce your name.
It's okay. It doesn't matter. Thank you. My name is Lionel Murez. I'm a board member with the Sun Valley Area Neighborhood Council. And I like the idea of, I'm supportive. I'm open-minded about these kind of progressive ideas to help more people get into government. I've just been struggling with my neighborhood council on trying to agendize like progressive ideas such as this, because most of my fellow board members are, I guess, not open to new progressive ideas. I've been struggling, and sometimes I get depressed and feel hopeless because my neighborhood council, like they seem hostile and antisocial, and I'm trying to pass, I've been really active in my community, but it's just sometimes I feel hopeless and giving up. But I don't want to give up because I know there are many people who are voiceless that need somebody to represent them. And I understand how difficult it is to get people to run for government. And I've been volunteering, doing canvassing work, door hanging and door-to-door knocking for local candidates running for office in this year's election And my question is, what can we do to support neighborhood council members who want to pass these kind of solutions, but they face hostile, from other board members who don't want to? Thank you for your time.
Yeah, that's a
You're
great
raising an
question.
interesting, I just want to say, I don't know that this would actually ever come to neighborhood councils. Let's talk for a minute about how this might get passed. Like what the process might look like, if it might be a council, a motion, in which case a neighborhood councils could file a community impact statement in a council file. Go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah. So currently our thinking is that probably the best way to get this passed is with a ballot initiative. That's what Seattle did to pass their system. And ultimately, this could go through the council, but we know that sitting politicians are often reluctant to change the system that they're used to. That's the system that they won with. They know it's going to protect their incumbency. So we're eyeballing 2024 for a ballot initiative at this point. Now that still absolutely requires this broader coalition building effort. And Mike can speak to our timeline a little bit too, but really for the next year, that's our central goal, is this coalition building piece. That's why we're here. That's why we're going to all these Zoom calls and presenting to groups, is we want to make the case. And there are a few pieces of that. One is just introducing the concept. I don't know how many people here had heard of democracy vouchers before today. A lot of people are not familiar with it, don't know the results from Seattle. And so just by introducing that, we think that we can get some more people on board. And then the second piece of that is, LA does have a big progressive movement. But we think we need to make the case that these good governance reforms like vouchers should also matter. If you care about racial justice, well, part of what's stopping better racial justice policy from getting passed is the campaign finance system. Same with climate. Part of what's stopping a better climate policy from getting passed is the campaign finance system, like Ji-Young was saying. And so that's the other part of our organizing work, is talking to groups like this one, right, that care about climate, or are involved with neighborhood councils, and can look at it from those other angles as well.
So it sounds like to Lionel's question, to part of his question, the first step, there's not anything, you're not necessarily asking neighborhood councils to take a position on anything right now, but the first step was just educating people about the idea and the possibility. Is that fair? So Lionel could just, maybe invite you, I don't know how busy you guys are, but invite you to his neighborhood council and make a presentation and, see what happens.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we'd love to. And I would, if we have one ask today, it's just that if other folks that might be interested in this, or maybe would have good thoughts on this, or, a way to push this forward, if you can connect us with those folks, we'd love to. We're happy to go to as many Zoom calls as it takes to keep sharing this idea. I will put my email in the chat as well. I think Mike was about to say something.
Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, I was just going to say, we're also working with a few folks in City Hall to see if we can pass a motion to study the impacts of democracy vouchers. Similar motion to the Public Banks LA group passed to study the impact of a public bank in LA. So if that comes to fruition, then I think there would be a way to engage with y'all in a formal way. But until then, I think right now we're looking for as many, we're happy to do as many presentations as possible. And then also, if you all would like to stay in touch with us, we just ask you send us your email address in the chat here, and then we can add you to our listserv so you can receive our updates.
Okay, thank you. Ji-Young.
Yeah, I wanted to address the cost question, which, some folks have heard in the committee presentation, but the actual cost of the program is absolutely like a valid concern. However, we all know that climate change is not waiting for us to have campaign finance reform. And we are in a very, very, very dire situation. This is not being alarmist. This is, just science. And so, and we also know that the cost of not taking climate action is more expensive the longer we wait. So when you look at the cost of this program, which is in the scheme of things, in the scheme of the larger budget of LA, 15 million is not a lot of money. And so like, we absolutely need this because the cost of not having fair elections is far, far, far greater. And I don't remember the other point, so I will just maybe raise my hand later. Thanks.
Fair enough.
One other point, Tom, do you want to talk to Lionel's question about what happened in South Dakota? Because I think that's a really interesting.
Yeah, that I'm glad you raised that. Because I think Lionel's question was regarding, is this only progressive folks, right? How do we get everyone else on board? And so Seattle is the only place where democracy vouchers has been implemented, but it actually also passed in South Dakota in 2016. Trump was on the ballot that year, got something like 70% of the statewide vote, but at the same time, democracy vouchers passes in a ballot initiative. And what we really saw is this can appeal to conservative, independent folks too. Everyone likes the idea. Almost everyone likes the idea of a government that's accountable to its people, right? And giving more folks a voice. Now, unfortunately, South Dakota is one of 6 states where ballot initiatives are non-binding on the legislature. So the legislature called an emergency session in early 2017 and repealed the program. And you can look this up. There were big protests out in front of the legislature, basically saying, you guys are, enabling yourself to be more corrupt. And so the program did not take effect. But what it proves is that, the only people that this is unpopular with are politicians. And I don't just want to attack politicians because we have some great politicians on this call. But sitting incumbent politicians who are used to the current campaign finance system, those are the folks who don't like this. But everyone else, progressive, conservative, or whatever, we found that we can convince them by making the case that, this isn't about that. This is about government that's accountable to everybody.
Thank you. Stacy.
Hi, former Sustainability Alliance representative from the Mar Vista Community Council, which you'll notice doesn't have a member here. So when you talk about councils that aren't considering progressive ideas, I'll let that just hang there. I have 2 questions. The first is, you're talking about only implementing this, proposing that this be implemented for city council, not county supervisors. Is that correct? And number 2 is, does this mean that if it were to pass and these were utilized, does that eliminate PAC money being used in an election? How do you deal with that influx of money, which obviously is much higher than the matching funds amounts that are used? Thank you.
Yeah, both great questions. So to the first one, yeah, we're only looking at LA City. We would love to pass this countywide, statewide, but unfortunately, public financing is actually banned at the state and county level in California. This comes out of some old ballot initiatives from 1986. I won't get into the full story, but essentially it's currently illegal to pass public financing programs at the state level. All it would take to overturn that would be another statewide ballot initiative to overturn the previous one that banned this. But we view this as, let's get this done in Los Angeles first. There are folks working in San Diego, there are folks working in Oakland on this. If we can all pass these systems in our cities, we can turn that into some, countywide, statewide momentum to then, overturn that old rule banning public financing and get these systems passed to those levels as well. Your second question was about PACs. And the answer is, there's a little bit we can do around the edges on PACs, but ultimately, we're largely stuck with some of these Supreme Court decisions that make it hard for us to regulate special interests and the spending they can do. And so again, the goal of this program is not necessarily to stop that money, because we just don't have that power as a city. But what we can do is we can make it easier for challengers who say, okay, hey, incumbent, you're going to take all this PAC money, you're going to run special interest support, fine. But I'm going to have the support of people using democracy vouchers, and that's going to make me able to raise enough to fund my campaign.
Thank you. Liz.
Hi, my name's Liz Amsden. I'm an ex-neighborhood council board member, and I am still a budget advocate representing fiscal and service issues across the city. I went digging through, and because last fall I read an article, and there was some point that stuck out, and that is that foreign entities own 40% of US corporate stock, which may benefit our economy, but may be a problem for democracy. Corporate executives make decisions based on their investors' interests. And ExxonMobil CEO once said, "I'm not a US company. I don't make decisions based on what's good for the US." A poll showed that 73% of Americans, including majorities of both Democrats and Republicans, feel foreign entities should not be able to influence our elections directly or indirectly, and would like to limit political spending by companies with any foreign ownership. And as Tom just said, if we can't limit these, at least we can offset that by giving money to the people who we feel are going to support our views. Thank you.
That's an awesome point. I'm so glad you brought that up. Because when I said we can't limit PACs, that was actually slightly misleading, because what Liz just brought up is actually something that we can do. And this is on our, we've been focused on democracy vouchers thus far, but we actually have a broader list of policies we'd like to push alongside this. And so this is actually something that Seattle also passed, is a ban on spending by foreign influenced corporations. And so, that 40% of US stock that foreign nationals own, this includes companies like Uber, right? Saudi Arabia has a 10% stake in Uber, and then they go and spend massive amounts in California elections, right? And in no other case would it be acceptable for a foreign government or from people from foreign countries to be influencing US politics. But for some reason, we've decided that in campaign finance, that's okay. Well, this is actually something that LA City can do something about. And so, along with, vouchers is our personal favorite. But alongside that, we do want to push some of these other reforms.
Super interesting. Ji Young again. I think you remembered what you wanted to say.
I did, and I wanted to say that, it's kind of been said in other words before, but this is not just a progressive initiative. This is basically, do you want people to have a say in government? Do you want everyone to have a say in government, or do you want just the people with the most money to have a say in government? There, without endorsing any kind of legislation, I just want to highlight that there is a state bill currently to ban foreign corporate money in working its way through the state legislature. So just wanted to highlight that.
Interesting. And then does anybody have any other thoughts on how this might affect our sustainability work? I know we've touched on it, but I'm wondering if anybody has any additional thoughts, or if any candidates or former candidates have thoughts about how this might affect or might have affected their elections. And Joanne.
I realize this can't help very soon on the state level, but what we've discovered looking at what is happening in the world of trees is that this incredible push for market rate development on the state level is actually creating no space for trees. And we are realizing that the ideas that are going to be in the new landscape ordinance are not even implementable, that they literally are building to the property lines. And so as new, there's pressure to build, and any developer will tell you that affordable housing is just a nuisance. And so they will do it, but they will do it in very, very small percentages. So as a result, there are, I was told that there are 90,000 vacant units in the city of LA right now that are not being inhabited. So this problem is being foisted on us with RENA numbers by the state. And so really the state politicians are the ones that we really need to, take a look at, because they're standing in the way of affordable housing, and they're really heavily influenced by money from the building lobby. So it's a problem that I see has to be solved on the state level first. I mean, I think the penetration there is almost more important than the city level.
Thank you. Tom or Mike, did you want to respond in any way, or should we go to Stacy?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say we agree. We want to do this at every level. Our view is just strategically, it's best to start at the city and introduce this to folks. And then, once you have some folks that are used to it in LA, who can tell their Bay Area friends, oh, this is actually a good idea, this is something we like, then introduce it statewide. But that's more of a strategic view. You're right, this is urgent at every level of government. This is urgent at the federal level too. And ultimately we have a lot of different battles we need to fight.
Thank you. Stacy.
Lisa, addressing your question of how this might affect our work involving sustainability, let's just take a small look at the microcosm of the environment in which I've worked in the last 5 years. I am not necessarily a progressive, but I like progressive ideas. And I served in an area where it is over 70% renters. But yet for the Mar Vista Community Council, the ones who vote and participate are predominantly single family residential owners. So when I would bring more progressive ideas, as Lionel had said he's experienced, I was shot down a lot, whether it was affordable housing, renters' rights, which is an area I work on, sustainability alliance initiatives. If we had a voucher system, and the outreach was done to those renters who feel like this would give them more of an equal vote and voice, I will tell you that my work with the tenants in this area who feel completely overlooked and of no consequence, they are a majority, and they are predominantly very progressive and very clued into our initiatives coming out of the NCSA, and I think it would increase their ability to participate. I think this would have a striking effect on us, because those who are renting and those who are using mass transit and those who are lower income, who are bearing the brunt of the cost of the climate and economic injustices and environmental injustices right now, would feel empowered to participate. Using what happened in Seattle, I think this would radically change participation in the city, and sustainability is, I hate to say it, but much more of a renters and a lower aged population issue. And those are predominantly renters. And I think it would have a positive influence. And that's why I am so encouraged by this, because I know what happened in Seattle, and it brought issues to the forefront that were being overlooked by homeowners and by older generations who just don't understand the severity of our issues. So I wanted to answer that to you, Lisa. I think we know this would be more participation, and that's better for all of us.
Thank you. Thank you. You're getting a lot of kudos from the group. So thank you, Stacy.
Please don't forget, I am a white woman who's privileged, who lives on the west side, who owns a home. And as I tell Lisa all the time, and I've told Philip, who I've worked with, I'm not progressive. I just like progressive ideas. I hate labels, but I honestly, there are a lot more people like me that feel that our kids need to be represented and encouraged to participate. My kids are being left out, and they'd love the vouchers. So I'll represent them and say, this is a great idea.
Thank you. John.
Yes, John Hales from Northridge South. I guess my question kind of goes to your presentation. When you look at the politicians over the years, the decades, they were all white at one point, and all the way across your scale, you showed that there were very few each decade of new people that were coming in, which is a good thing, or it could be a bad thing. Now, when you're producing this capability for everybody to have a say in how money is raised is an exciting thing to happen. However, what we've learned over the past decade is that politicians have discovered that if money does not go into their actual account or into their expenditure, they can just claim ignorance. And what I'm referring to is their pet projects get funded. And these special projects, the money appears out of nowhere, buying properties, et cetera, that really don't get assessed against that politician. So when we have this, how is that going to be addressed with this type of voting, if you will?
Yeah, definitely. I think you made two really great points. The first of which is just that slide where we had the dots. There weren't very many dots, right? In the 1980s, all of the 1980s, there were 7 new people who joined the city council, you know, and that goes up a little in recent decades. But yeah, as you said, that's a story about incumbency and folks getting reelected and not having a lot of turnover. So we can debate whether or not that's good. I would argue, you know, okay, you don't want a new person every time, but maybe you want some ability to challenge an incumbent, right? And not just have them win. To your second point, you know, you're right that historically campaign finance reform has been all about, let's cut off this source of money, and then politicians find another source. Okay, let's cut this off, you know, and they find another source, or, you know, businesses find another way, as you said, to spend on their pet projects. And so that's a worthy cause, trying to cut off sources of money. But ultimately, you know, it's like you're filling holes in the levee, right? And water is just seeping through. And so what we want to do instead is just say, that's a hard problem to solve. And we want people to keep fighting that. But over here, we want to create a system where if you're a candidate who doesn't want to be part of that, who just wants to run with support from the people, you should be able to do that. And so that's what we're creating, right? We're not necessarily stopping the flow of money to your pet projects, right? Or stopping super PACs. That's, you know, an admirable goal, but that's not the goal of this program. But what we're going to do instead is say, if you're a challenger who wants to run against that politician, we want you to be well enough funded that then you can go out and say, hey, your pet projects are being funded by the fossil fuel companies, right? And you can make that case to voters. And, you know, if that's persuasive enough, you can beat them.
All right, thank you. Well, I think this has been a great conversation. There was a couple questions in the chat that haven't been asked. Any last parting comments or questions? If not, we will wrap it up. Miran, I think Miran, you can close us out, and we will then we'll ask actually Tom and Mike to close us out.
Excellent. So Tom, I have one simple question. Do you believe that the small money democracy vouchers will balance out the big money PAC in Seattle's municipal election? And then secondly, was that ballot initiative approved in 2015 to launch the vouchers, which are funded by an annual $3 million property tax levy? And then finally, is every registered voter plus adult non-registered could receive $425 paper vouchers?
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, as you said, it was passed in 2015. Seattle chose to fund it with a property tax levy. Obviously, we can choose, you know, whatever funding source we want. And I should mention, we haven't settled on what that funding source should be. We know that this is a program the city can afford, but that's part of the questions that we want to pose to a broader coalition of city groups and not just make that decision on our own. Your final point was, yeah, this is not just something that registered voters can use. In Seattle, this is something that any city resident can use, which matches laws around donating money. You actually don't have to be a US citizen to donate money. You just have to be a legal permanent resident. And so we would, we would want to make vouchers available to the broadest possible swath of LA folks as well.
Great, that's fascinating. You're saying you don't have to be a voter or a citizen possibly?
Right, a green card can do it too.
Yeah, exactly. And so this is a decision for LA to make. But in Seattle, that's the decision that they made. It is mostly registered voters who make use of the program, but they wanted this to be a representative group of Seattle, which is not just composed of US citizens. There are other folks who have a stake in Seattle politics as well. And so that was the choice they make. That's likely what we would want to do as well in LA.
Well, just so you know, that's actually how the neighborhood council system works. You don't have to be a registered voter. You don't have to be a citizen. You have to demonstrate that you're a stakeholder, which has been, anyway, there's a whole other conversation to have about that. Stacy's asking, what's the age cutoff? Would it be 18 years old?
18, yeah, or at least it's 18 in Seattle. Again, this is a question we could decide for LA. I know I keep saying that, but yeah, it would likely be 18.
Okay.
And one last thing, Tom, there is actually a Senate bill in New York. They are working on getting the voucher system. And next month is the last vote and it will go to financing.
That's great. I wasn't familiar with that. We will take a look.
I will send it to you, everything.
Yeah, please do.
And Devon, you were raising your hand fleetingly. Did you have a question or comment that you wanted to share?
Yeah, I had a couple questions, but I was just gonna reach out to them. That's why I just asked, like, what's the name of the organization, group, or website that I'll be able to contact and ask further questions?
Yeah, sure. Let me just type our group name and email in the chat. And yeah, feel free to get in touch with questions, or if there are other folks you think we should talk to, or just advice, comments in general, any of that.
One last note too, there's also groups in Oakland, San Jose, San Bernardino, and San Diego pushing democracy vouchers right now. So it's becoming a serious alternative proposal for campaign finance.
Okay, I keep saying we're almost done, but we have 2 raised hands and I actually have a question. Let's go to Anish.
Really quick, how is this implemented amongst the unhoused population? How do you target the vouchers to them?
Sure. Yeah, so in Seattle, which again, we would want to replicate, but to be decided by the community, as you know, every registered voter gets vouchers automatically in the mail. And so that covers a large swath of the population. But then candidates can go around with replacement voucher forms, knowing that a lot of folks get their vouchers and may throw them away, or that there are folks who are unhoused, right, and who aren't receiving anything in the mail. And so candidates go around with those forms and can make their pitch, and the voter can fill it out right then at the door. And so then all that has to happen is the city just confirms that person hasn't already used their vouchers. And once they've done that, then it just works the same. The candidate gets a check.
I can imagine a lot of the funds would be required for running this would be the administration stuff.
Yeah, I mean, there's some administrative side. Ultimately what has to happen is you have to print some vouchers, you have to mail them out to folks, and then you have like a giant Excel spreadsheet of who's submitted their vouchers to make sure. So, there's some administrative costs, but it's not that different from many things the city already has to do.
And then my last question, which is I hope our last question, is so what happens next and how do you get something on the ballot if that's what you're trying to do?
Sure. Yeah, Mike, do you want to run through?
Yeah, just a quick timeline. So what's happening next? Between now and end of year, we're going to be researching a number of other good governance policies, ranked choice voting, proportional representation, citizen redistricting commissions, citizen charter review commissions, and banning contributions from foreign influenced corporations. We're also going to be continuing to do presentations like this, organizing the community. Then at the start of 2023, we want to bring together members of a coalition to start fleshing out and deciding what the policy is going to look like for the 2024 ballot initiative. For the second half of 2023, we're going to start gathering signatures. And then 2024 is all basically GOTV for the ballot initiative.
Okay. Well, thank you. This has been so, I think, to what Lionel was saying earlier, when Mike and Tom presented at our advocacy committee, I just felt so hopeful because I really think this makes me feel more positive about the future. So I hope Lionel and others feel the same way. And I hope this works personally. So thank you guys. Any last words?
Yeah, that's a great note to end on. Yeah, thank you so much for having us today. We appreciate the chance to present to the larger group. Again, if anyone wants to get in touch, our emails and our website are in the chat. So please reach out.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Mike. That was great.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike and Tom.
All right, now I'm handing it over to Dan Cagle, our Energy Committee Chair, because something he's been dreaming about for years is actually
Yes.
coming to fruition.
All right.
So this is a big deal, and Dan appears to be in his spaceship.
Yes.
And ready to talk about going all electric, having our buildings totally decarbonized.
Yeah.
So Dan, the floor is yours.
Let's see. Oh, I'm not even muted. Nice. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, so everybody here is very aware of the climate change problems and the need to do things like shut down natural gas storage at Aliso Canyon. And one of the best ways that the city can address those problems, as well as some air quality problems, is to make it so that buildings don't burn natural gas. And the problem is sort of split up into two. There's the general problem of all the existing buildings and fixing them, and then the special problem of just making it so that new buildings, when they're built, are built to be all electric. And so we have two council files, one for each of those parts of the problem, I think. The general problem and then the special problem of new buildings. And let me bring up my fact sheet for the first one, if I can figure out how to share my screen.
I made you a co-host, so you should be able to share.
Thank you. You know, the whole problem, though, is the it's technology. It's hard.
Click on the bottom of your screen.
I'm working on it. Let's see. There. Okay. So the first council file is 21-1463. And it's the general problem of all the existing buildings. What it proposes is that the council, that the Climate Emergency Mobilization Office hold public forums to discuss the problem and sort of get people's input. And that council file has already passed and the meetings are already starting to be held. We already have 2 community impact statements in favor of that council file. So while this is a really important council file, I don't know that we need a whole lot more support. We need maybe 3 more neighborhood councils to support it. So if you're gung-ho and you have a very progressive neighborhood council, go ahead and do a community impact statement on this, if you like. Community impact statements can be very short. They just have to say something like this. Zero emission buildings save money, improve health and safety, and help the environment. The city should come up with a sensible plan to retrofit all existing buildings in a way that is cost effective and fair to both renters and owners. And then you can add a little bit more if you like, but that's the key bit. Okay, so that is the first council file. Now, Lisa, did you want to hold a vote individually?
Let's talk about the other one and then have two separate votes.
Moving on.
Let's find out if there are any questions or comments on this one before we move to the next one.
Questions?
I don't see any hands raised, so maybe everybody's good.
Okay. Moving on to the next one.
Oh,
if-
we've got a hand, now we've got two hands raised. See, that's what happens. Glenn,
It's takes a little time to raise a hand virtually.
Yeah.
So the report back, the 120 day, I think it said report back. Who is it? The Climate Emergency Mobilization Office that's doing the report back, or are there other entities that are doing the report back?
Well, let's take a look at the motion, I guess. And report back. There are other organizations that have to do report backs. It's a very long motion. One of them is the Department of Building and Safety.
on the screen that you're sharing, can you open up the motion
Sure.
so everybody can see?
Yeah, coming right up. I think this is the right window.
Yeah.
So yes, the first report back is from the Climate Emergency Mobilization Office. The second is from Department of Building and Safety. And the third is from the Housing Department. So it's a great big motion.
And then there's maybe DWP, or do they not have a report back?
DWP doesn't have a report back.
Okay.
Okay, does that answer the question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, who's next?
Devon, did you have a question or comment?
No, I got answered already.
Okay, thanks. Joanne.
So who would pay for all this retrofitting?
That's the key question. I think there's a whole lot of state funding. I think there's something on the order of $200 million statewide coming up. To some extent, it's going to be owners, but there's a whole lot of help from both the feds and the state. And that's one of the big topics of these community meetings, I think.
So some kind of rebate, maybe.
Yes, there's going to be some rebates, and there's going to be incentives paid directly to developers to get them to do this kind of thing, I think.
And you know, as we've discussed before, but I think bears repeating, there's a real problem with rebates, because that assumes that people have the money to pay up front and then wait oftentimes many months. So that's a real barrier for entry that's problematic.
And there's programs both from DWP and from the state right now to address that very problem. Big amounts of money for zero emission affordable homes is opening up.
Nish.
Yeah, I'll just mention that point came up at the Climate Emergency Mobilization Office meetings, like on Thursday, and many people at the meeting suggested, right, or mentioned that they prioritize that these limited amounts of incentive funds go towards like low-income households or low-income neighborhoods, because there is such limited funding for this. Just thought I'd raise that point.
Thank you.
Who's next?
Nobody.
Okay, moving right along. Let me pull up the next window if I can find it.
So we're moving to the second motion now?
We're moving to the second motion, and I'm trying to find the share screen button.
I guess we haven't been in the pandemic quite long enough, huh?
No, I need more pandemic time. And the annoying thing is that I also have to have the right tab open for this to work.
I've learned if you move the tab to the front to be the first one, that's how it'll show up when you want to share your screen.
Yeah, annoying. Okay, yes, the tab has to be in front.
Yes.
So here we are. The second one is just about new buildings. And the neat thing about it is 45 California cities already do this. So we wouldn't be leading the way here. We'd be following. And it is a path that's fairly well trodden. And in fact, the state urges cities and provides technical assistance for cities to do this, to require that new buildings be all or nearly all electric. And the benefits are the same as for the previous one, but the nice thing about this is that less money is required because it turns out that it's actually cheaper to build zero emission buildings and cheaper to live in them. So it's kind of like a win-win-win. We might end up with lower utility bills in general because of this. You know, there are also ways that it could cost more money, but from the state's analysis, if they do this right, it will save people money. So this one should be a no-brainer, but it has to go through 4 committees and it has not passed any of them yet. And so no matter what city council district you're in, there's a pretty good chance that your council member is either on one of those committees or chairing it or co-chairing it. So I think we need all the neighborhood councils we can, ideally 10 or more, to file a CIS in favor of this. And the CIS text is a little shorter for this. It just says zero emission buildings save money, improve health and safety, and help the environment. The city should come up with a sensible plan to require new buildings to have zero emissions in a way that is fair to both renters and owners. And this language is motherhood and apple pie. It's really hard for anybody to disagree with it, I think. I wrote it carefully, and it has been battle tested. A homeowner who was worried about things was mollified by the fact that it has fair to owners in it, and a renter was mollified by the fact that it has fair to renters in it. So, any questions?
Stacy.
Go
ahead, Stacy.
Dan, I'm just a little bit confused, and maybe it's my lack of good memory. About 3 years ago, you visited RNC and we passed a CIS, and that was for no gas in any new buildings. Is this similar to what that you presented to us about 3 years ago and we filed a CIS on? And if so, why is there a new council file on this? What happened with the old council file?
There was, you know, my memory is worse than yours, I'm sure. There was a council file about a moratorium on gas connections in new buildings.
Yes.
But that one, and you're right, it was essentially the same thing, but there wasn't momentum behind it yet. There's a lot of momentum behind it now. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and so my question is going to be, with a new neighborhood council over there and I'm not involved, they're not going to pass a CIS on this. Can you borrow the old CIS from the old council file and use that?
No, I don't think so, Lisa.
No, it does not work that way.
Yeah, and in fact, I think that the CISs sort of expire when the board membership changes.
I'm pretty sure they do too. So I'll just have to provide community input. Okay.
Well, I would not say they expire because they're still there. So I actually disagree with.
They stay on the council file that expires.
They don't expire, but you can't use them as justification for making a statement saying that this is the position of the board, because it's a different board.
Thank you.
Yes, I would still, well, okay, I would disagree with that a little bit, but let's not get into details here. Nish.
Yeah, so I brought this up at our downtown LA neighborhood council meeting a few weeks ago or last week, and a big debate ensued, and it's going to go back to our plug committee tomorrow. So I'd like a little bit more information to kind of support support our group to write a impact statement in support of this. So, like, you raised 2 points, right? Like about how, new buildings or these zero emission buildings are cheaper to build and live in. Can you provide some like information on that? Like why are they cheaper to build and live in? For starters?
Well, sure. There's a little bit in the sources section of this fact sheet. You've seen the fact sheet, right?
Yes.
Okay. So point 7, the Reach Code cost effectiveness study, is the one with the details. If you're really able to read dense policy documents, that's the one to go to. Maybe we should chat offline.
Well, but let's give some simple answers. One huge one is you don't have the infrastructure for gas. You've just taken out a huge cost.
That's
so
true.
That's the main reason it's cheaper to build the building. And energy costs are going to be coming down as we get more solar, et cetera, on. So, and gas costs are going to get more expensive. So the projections are that this is it's going to be cheaper and cheaper. And also with heat pumps, with lots of this new technology, and Dan, correct me when I get something wrong, because I probably will, but heat pumps are super efficient. They're expensive to get at the upfront, but they're super efficient. And they also serve as air conditioners and heaters.
Yeah, I think that's the main point. The fact that you don't need a gas connection to the street, and you don't need to duplicate the heater and the air conditioner. There's just one unit. It's about the same cost as an air conditioner. Those two things save a lot of money up front.
Thanks.
So the harder thing, I'm sorry, go ahead, Nish.
Yeah, continue your point, Lisa.
No, go ahead.
Okay, so thanks for that. I'll look further into the citations, the references there. But another thing that came up, if you look at the board, the motion, they were talking about, or it mentions how the like by March, I believe, or no, sorry, 6 months from March. So what is that? September, DWP, is it, or Building and Safety is supposed to issue a report as to how to go about doing this, like, right, like how the city should proceed. And the board members of the D-Lane committee were like concerned, like they felt like the city was kind of like that was like rushing things, right? Like, so we get this report like in September or October, and then with just like a month or two of like review, the city is supposed to like begin implementing this really new policy. Like this came up, and so there was a lot of concern about that. Like,
yeah.
what would you say about that? Or what would you say?
I'd say that the reason that it's possible to do it on this timeline is because so many other cities have already done it, and the state is providing sort of a template for cities to follow. And the city already has to come up with new building code changes by January 1st. So if they do those changes with this in mind, it won't actually be that big of a change potentially.
I see. Potentially, like I want to know about those, like, so, like, right, like you kind of mentioned that the state projects that it would be or thinks that these buildings would be cheaper to build, but in some but we're not entirely sure. Like what situations might arise that would actually make them more expensive, and are they likely?
Well, it depends on the climate zone, right? If you're in an area where it's really, really cold, then it might be more expensive to put in the insulation necessary to make this pay off. But we're lucky. I think we're in a climate zone where it's the heating need is moderate, so it just comes down to conditions. And the analysis I'm pointing to is probably the best place to get more details for in item number 7.
Got it.
For those of you who were not at the meeting that Nish referred to, as we've been talking about, and we'll talk about again tonight, the Climate Emergency Mobilization Office is hosting a series of meetings specific to this topic. And the first one was last Thursday. The next one is this Thursday. They showed at this past Thursday a bunch of charts showing that pretty much, I forget the specifics, but in the vast majority of cases, it's going to be less expensive. I mean, that's really the simple story. I'm sure you can get into details where there will be exceptions, but they will be exceptions.
The analysis that I'm pointing to is going to be updated in a few months. So we'll have even more data on it soon.
And Nish, and one thing we should say to Nish and everybody is Dan and I and others are happy to come to your neighborhood council. If you need a little bit more, I don't know, oomph behind what you're doing to get you across the finish line, we're happy to come and talk.
Yeah, I'm
Dan,
very
so-
happy. I'm very happy to help out because every time I do, I get better at it.
So if I might, I'd like to invite y'all to come attend as guests or members of the public for our pluck committee tomorrow evening, and where you can chime in and provide comment on this, because this is like we had like about 30-minute debate about this the other day. It's really contentious. So your support would be appreciated.
Great. Can you email me a reminder tonight?
Yeah, if I can get your email address.
It's dank@kegel.com. I'm putting it in the chat right now.
Got it. Thanks.
Oh, wait. Let me fix that. Technology.
Okay,
it's in the chat.
let's go to Stacy and then Jesselyn.
Sorry, this is for Dan and also for Nish. If you can provide a link in the chat, that would be great. This is something that I've working on the Sustainable Developers Guidelines. I mentioned to Lisa the other day that hopefully our group can get back together because I've been doing a lot of work on research into the zero carbon building materials and went to a zero carbon concrete pour involving a residential structure in Malibu last Monday. And I've also been doing very heavy research on what are called SIPs, structural panels that are now in the building code that use cement board from recycled cement. It has fully framed and insulation in it. It's now in the building code and it's sustainable and zero carbon. And it's just coming to the market here in America, and the construction costs are noticeably less than not only our current construction costs, primarily because the cement manufacturers are now using recycled concrete and there's no price differential between that and normal concrete for their zero carbon materials. But also the construction time is substantially lower, which saves costs. So I don't think any of that's in that analysis yet, but everything that I've been looking at to put into our guidelines points to the fact that being sustainable and having zero carbon emissions can be done quite effectively with a great deal of cost savings per square foot in construction. So hopefully we'll update our guidelines to include a lot of this as well.
Thank you, Stacy. Jesselyn.
Thank you, Lisa. I'm sorry, I missed who was speaking earlier, and I'm sorry if I missed this detail, but I was just kind of curious to hear. Somebody was saying that they had their neighborhood council had a contentious meeting, and they're meeting again tomorrow on it. I was curious to hear the opposition.
Yeah.
What were the points of opposition?
Yeah, so a few of our board members are, part of the development community or the architects. And so they're really like ingrained in like the details of project management and just construction. And they were concerned that, with all of these costs, I guess this was new to him. Like these zero emission buildings were really new to him. He hadn't heard about it before. And so before, we passed a CIS in support of this, he just wanted to take it back to committee, to the pluck committee, which he heads or which he chairs, to have a more third discussion with more information, more details. So yeah, the opposition then, to be sure, came primarily from the development community, especially considering downtown, right? Like, there's a lot of, large buildings that come up, right? I think at the meeting on Thursday that Lisa referenced or mentioned, they mentioned that 30% of all building energy consumption comes from just 3% of buildings in LA. And the examples that they used were like Wilshire Grand, right? But basically like these large skyscrapers in downtown. So yeah, like, so I think he kind of comes from that perspective. So that's who we'll be trying to like convert or who I'll be trying to convert at Tuesday's meeting.
You know, there's a group called the US Green Building Council LA chapter. Do you have any of do you know any of those guys?
No, I do
Because
not.
they would be really good to have at this meeting too. I'll see if I can grab one.
Okay.
And we have heard a little, I haven't heard it directly, but I have heard that there is pushback from developers. And the piece I heard, and Kathy and Dan, correct me if I'm getting this wrong, but I think we heard this from Blumenfield's office, that developers are going to have to change some things. Like, if they're going to have to change their plans when they get rid of all this gas infrastructure. And I think for them, that's an obstacle and a headache. But I mean, they're going to have to do that. So there you go. So it's a change. It does involve a change for them. And, people don't like change.
Yes, we're moving their cheese.
Right. Okay, I'm starting to get anxious about time, but we will go to Liz.
Yeah. I was interested to hear about SIPs being recycled concrete, because they've been actually in use for over 20 years, but generally with recycled or pressed wood surface with insulation. I have issues with concrete just because it is such a wasteful product. However, I do strongly support SIP's construction simply because it's a very good insulation. And so we may not need insulation against cold in Southern California, but we sure need it against the heat in the summer. And so it will help keep the cool in. So that's all I wanted to say.
Okay, thank you. I don't want to go too down that path because it's a little bit of a tangent and we're tight on time, but we will be having those conversations, and we have had some of those conversations. Joanne.
My son lives in one of those houses in North Carolina that where they are not allowed to build with gas anymore. And so he's been living there for several years. He owns the house. I think the thing he misses most is gas cooking. So I think that's the, just being devil's advocate here, that's probably the thing that's missed most. Although I've heard that there's another form of cooking that is not electric and that some chefs have really adapted to and like. The HVAC, builders sometimes put in really cheap units, and his house is relatively new, and has now an $8,000 expense to totally replace it because they put in a crummy unit. But he really likes the heat. He said the heat is very even, more even than gas heat. And of course, we all hate fracking, so it's great to get away from gas. And I'm just wondering about the solar demand that we're going to start to have, because some homes just won't be able to put enough solar panels to actually heat their home, especially nighttime use and so forth. So this is going to increase solar demand, I think. Otherwise, they're going to be refiring our coal plants, which would be horrific. But I'm just thinking about all the sort of pros and cons here. I mean, generally like the idea, but those are some of the arguments we're going to get.
LADWP is building lots and lots of solar and wind. So that generally isn't a problem, I think.
Well, and I forget what it's called, but the whole demand, what's it called? When you manage the demand, they're going to really try to make us use things at different times of the day, which I think is not going to be fun, but that is part of the transition, I think.
But part of that is going to be appliances that automatically do the right thing, so people don't have to notice that they're using energy at the right time.
Right, getting smarter appliances, yes.
Yep.
Good point. Okay, Glenn.
Oh, I do acknowledge that the renewable, feed into the electric grid, and so it can be more sustainable. But my concern is that this needs to be paired with increasing the reliability of the electrical transmission. I'm hearing from more and more people that they're getting power outages from DWP. And I'm not sure if it's the age of the equipment. And this is not about, the planned power outages due to high winds. This is just power failures, random power failures for extended periods of time. So I don't know if there's anything in this motion that addresses that, but when you have no alternative, you have no way to cook, no way to heat your water because your power is out for 36 hours. That's a problem. So I guess that's kind of a question. Is there anything in this initiative that increases the reliability and reduces the interruption of electric power?
Not specifically in this, but the DWP knows that it has work to do on reliability and is trying to bulk up that effort. It's something they're very aware of.
Yeah, that's one of their huge priorities, which strikes me as ironic because I agree. I don't, if that's your priority, then why isn't our power reliable? So yeah, they have as I think Stacy's saying, yeah, we have an aging infrastructure. They have not kept up. It is a problem, but I think one of the ways they're thinking this is going to work is that as we scale up our energy usage, we're actually reducing the cost because of economies of scale. So they're actually counting on us using more electricity so that they can provide us more reliable power. That sounds a little counterintuitive, but that's really how they're planning on pulling this off.
But I just have to emphasize that they've been very aware of the reliability problem. And if you look, they've been tracking it and trying to increase the investments every year. There was a period of 20 years or so where they just didn't, or maybe longer, where they just didn't make the investments needed. And it's taking a long time to catch up.
Okay, I'm trying to wrap it up because we have to go to 2 votes. So John, if you can be quick, that will be appreciated.
No problem. Thank you. Solar. We've had a solar system for 6 years. Halfway through, about 3 years, we realized that the solar was offsetting our costs during the day. So we went around and researched and found out that if you get a battery that collects during the day, and at night it switches over from the solar panels to the battery, our electric bill for the past 6 months has been 0. Thank you.
That's fantastic, John. I know it's super exciting what's coming, what's in our future and in some people's current, in some people's present. Yeah.
Okay.
Are we ready for a vote? Philip, did you want to say something?
I just wanted to add that there is opposition also from the gas lobby, from SoCal Gas, that your neighborhood council could have, had communication with. They're going to oppose this.
SoCal Gas is facing an existential crisis. And so, yes, that's a great point. They might show up. They've shown up in the past. And if they show up, please, 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 please tell us, because we can actually help if we know.
Yep.
Okay, so we have talked about in the future, we might not do roll call votes because the roll call takes a bit of time, but we're not prepared to do that yet. So we're going to do 2 roll call votes as quickly as we can. First, we're going to do it on the motion that was passed just a couple of days ago from 2021 on the, do you want to explain that one? It's on the community assemblies, and it's really on the housing justice and the really making sure that everybody is brought along. It's not just new buildings. It affects all buildings, and it's about making sure we have a strong community process and that we have a focus on equity.
Right. I think you said it.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, thank you. Muriel, are you ready to,
Oh, and the motion is, should we recommend that neighborhood councils pass CISs in favor of 21
Yes. Thank you.
1643?
Thank you. Exactly. Yes. Muriel, are you ready?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Lisa?
Yes.
Okay. I vote yes. Dan?
Abstain.
Okay. Miran?
Dan, why are you abstaining? You're the Energy Committee Chair. You are voting in
Yes.
that capacity. You are not
Yes.
representing your neighborhood council.
Asked and answered?
Thank you. Thank you, Miran.
What did he,
Joanne?
sorry, what did Miran do?
He said yes.
Okay, thank you.
Joanne?
No.
No. Devon?
Abstain, because I don't know what we're voting for. That's why.
Okay, thank you. Ernie?
Ernie is not,
Yes.
Ernie
Okay.
doesn't have a vote. I
True.
probably didn't take him off the list, but I should have.
Oh, so take them out. Okay, Jean?
Yes.
Thank you. Glenn?
Yes.
Thank you. Jesselyn?
Yes.
Thank you. Joan?
Yes.
Thank you. John?
Abstain?
Okay. Kathy?
Yes.
Thank you. Laura?
Yes.
Thank you. Nish?
Yes.
Thank you. Pat?
Yes.
Philip?
Yes.
Robbie?
Yes.
Thank you. Terry?
Again, are we voting for 21-1463?
Yes.
Yes.
And Carol?
Yes.
Thank you. So that makes,
Do I not have a vote?
Oh, yeah, you
Oh.
should have been, no, Ji Young
have a
does.
vote. Oh, my bad. Okay.
Yeah, that's what she was marked. Thank you for calling that out, Ji Young.
Okay.
So Ji Young, what is your vote?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. Okay, so that's out of 21.
Are there other people here who aren't on the list?
Maybe. I mean, if we got you wrong, we might have gotten somebody else wrong, and I probably got Ernie wrong. So yeah, if you were not called out to vote and you think you should be voting, let us know. But it looks good to me. I think we're good.
So it's 16-0-2. 2 meaning abstain.
Oh, 2 abstentions. Okay. I never know which
I
is
thought
what.
there were 3 abstains.
Oh, sorry.
What was
I'm counting in real time, so I'm just.
We have Dan abstained, John abstained, and Devon abstained, I think. Yeah, so 3 abstentions.
Oh,
You're
wait,
right.
and there's 1 no, my bad. There's 1 no. So that, yeah, that counts up to 20. So 16-1-3.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you, guys. This is very, very exciting. This is, you guys, we have been working on this for years, and I am not kidding. So this is a very, very exciting thing for us. So thank you for your support. Let's move on to the next motion, which is about new buildings, which is actually something that, as Dan said, has been passed by what, 40, 50 cities in the state. So anyway, we are coming to the party late, but we are at the party. So the motion, can you read what you, can you do what you said for the other one, Dan? We are voting to,
We're voting, this is a vote to support Council File 22-0151, which which directs the city to come up with a plan for how to require new buildings to be zero emission.
thank you. Okay, Muriel, floor is yours.
Okay, Lisa,
Yes.
I vote yes. Dan,
Abstain.
abstain. Brown,
Yes.
Joanne,
Yes.
yes. Devon,
Yeah.
thank you. Jean,
Yes.
yes. Glenn,
Abstain.
abstain. Jesselyn,
Yes.
thank you. Jiyoung,
Yes.
thank you. Joan,
Yes.
okay. John,
Abstain.
okay. Kathy,
Yes.
okay. Laura,
Yes.
Nish,
Abstain.
abstain. Pat,
Yes.
thank you. Philip,
Yes.
yes, oh, thank you.
Yes.
Robbie,
Yes.
Terry,
Yes.
okay, and Carol.
Yes.
Okay, so that makes that. It's 16-0-4 in favor.
All right. Thank you, guys. That is super, super, super exciting. This is really the, as you probably have felt in the last, gosh, I don't know, year or two, we are building momentum like crazy. I mean, the COVID did not help. COVID slowed us down a lot, but we are moving quickly, which is fantastic because we have to be moving quickly. So this is a huge step for the city. Okay, I think we're ready to move on to, oh, Devon, you raised your hand. Devon, you want to say something?
Yeah, I was gonna say, now that the motion is passed, what is the motion that we passed for go from here? Is all right, go ahead.
No, that's a great question. Great. Was that it?
Yeah,
Can you rephrase the question, Lisa, or?
I think he's saying what now? Was that fair?
Yeah, that's fair.
So to me, the what now is we really want you folks to take this back to your neighborhood councils. Both or one, and Dan would prefer if you can only choose one that you work on the second one, because the first one has already passed city council. And this second one has to go through 4 committees. Also, I think both of these are going to pass. I'm actually not worried, but one of the reasons we want to get these in front of people is because just like you heard about that super interesting conversation with Nish and his board, these are the conversations we all should be having in our communities, because we are looking at big changes coming. And you heard Nish say, this is a guy who's an architect or something, and this was new to him. Like these things are, these changes, they should, I hope, will start happening very quickly. And so we got to get people on board very quickly. So that's really the main reason to take this back to your neighborhood councils, is to get people thinking about it, get people ready for this, get the idea socialized, so we are ready to move. So that's really the big thing.
Yeah, and as Natalie just pointed out in chat, this motion could get stuck at any one of those 4 committees. And so the more CIS is in favor, the less likely that's going to happen.
Yes, yes. So that would be super helpful. Devon, does that answer your question?
Yep.
Okay, cool. All right, thank you. Dan, did you have any last words?
Nothing, just remember 22-0151. That is our target.
22. Oh yeah, sorry, you're saying which one? Okay. So sorry, now I am having the Dan issue and I have to find it's right there. Why isn't it showing up when let's try this. I'm going to share my screen if I'm able, and we'll do quick report backs. Okay, there, I think it is. Okay, I want to share, this is the series that Dan and Nish were talking about. Super interesting, super interesting and educational series that we are working with the Climate Emergency Mobilization Office to promote. The one last Sunday was on why decarbonize
Thursday.
buildings and homes, and this Thursday it's going to be on energy and housing justice and building decarbonization. The following Thursday will be a just green workforce and building decarbonization. So if you have the time and you want to get more into this, these are great workshops to go to. I'm finding them really interesting. So I want to make sure you know about that. Our second group of Cool Block folks is starting. We're training them up this coming weekend. You can learn more on our website and sign up to be a Cool Block leader on our website. And some of you folks have offered to help us recruit. I think we will be picking up recruitment in the next month or so. So thank you. And I will be getting flyers to people and social media stuff to people who have asked.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, super exciting. We during COVID, Terry and Ernie and others made LA's Green New Deal toolkit for neighborhood councils. And as we mentioned briefly last time, the mayor's office has said they'd love to work with neighborhood councils to get the word out about this toolkit, specifically around Earth Day. So if you are interested in doing that, and Jessalyn, I know you sent me an email about this and I will answer it. We would love to work on this. So let us know if you want to work with the mayor's office to get the word out about the toolkit. Advocacy committee, a couple people tonight have mentioned the landscape ordinance, which is beginning to get developed. City planning has reached out to us, and our next advocacy committee meeting will be devoted to this subject. It will be Sunday, April 3rd. If you want to join and don't know how, you can email me, or you can just go to our website and you can get the link there. And now I'm going to turn it over to Dan, who really probably doesn't have anything to say, but go ahead.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add except that I just put in the chat a link to where I live blogged the climate equity meeting from last Thursday. So if you want a taste of what it was like, you can go to that link.
Did you do that on Twitter?
I did.
Oh my gosh, that's so fancy. Did Ji Young inspire you? 'Cause she was doing that in one of our meetings recently.
I don't know what came over me.
Okay, well, that's very cool. Okay, transportation.
Hello, so I'm just putting in a little sentence. So we had a meeting on March 3rd at 7 p.m. via Zoom. It's always the first Thursday. So we discussed our committee charter. We discussed like the process for Lacey funding. We had like a vehicle idling discussion and like the updates and possible motions in the future. We were trying to come up with the car sharing motion, and as well as like parking minimums, and upcoming things for our future agendas would be updates from the Healthy Streets LA and how far that movement is going in terms of getting all the neighborhood councils on board, as well as noise pollution.
Great, thank you, Mariel. Joanne, trees.
Yes, thank you. The Trees Committee is meeting next Saturday on Zoom at 1:30 to 3:30. And at the bottom of this card is my email address. You can copy down if you need it, if you would like to attend. A lot of people are concerned about the fact that SB 9 allows the division of single-family home lots into 4 homes. And what this is doing is affecting the space for trees, many trees getting felled, woodlands being destroyed, and so forth, unless there's some sort of intervention from City Council. They are allowed to make an amendment. the best person to speak on all of this is from a legal standpoint. And so CEQA attorney Jamie Hall has generously agreed to do a presentation on what SB 9 is going to mean for many of our neighborhoods and what can be done. And then we have other topics because there's a lot going on tree-wise in the city. The tree guarantee fee plantings are about to happen. That's the in lieu fee. A lot of people think they're not getting planted. So I'm going to reveal what streets in what areas, what council districts trees are supposed to be planted in the next month or so. Also, and what they're planting. Also, there is a new program about tree reports being required before projects are started. This is in a pilot stage, but it's starting to happen. And Lisa mentioned the new city landscape ordinance is in progress. There's a lot of concern about, will there be any room left for trees? This landscape ordinance does not apply to single family lots. It only applies to other lots. So we've seen a lot of builders building to the maximum on their properties. So we're going to be talking about that and how you can chime in or how you can listen to one of their programs. And it's possible that the NCSA is going to have them. Is that right, Lisa?
It's going to have what?
The landscape ordinance part of the planning department present? Are they going to present to the full NCSA?
No, they're not. They're going to present to the advocacy committee on
Only to the advocacy.
April
Okay.
3rd.
Okay,
Yeah.
got it. All right. And then there's one neighborhood council is proposing a city council motion regarding trees lost to demolition, preserving trees until the actual building happens rather than demolishing the trees at the same time as the structures are demolished. And we're going to talk about the new biologist at Rec and Parks, who's very good. And there's an interesting state bill 1404 from Senator Stern to support our oak woodlands throughout the state, including in the cities, as we have them in our hillsides. And what are appropriate mitigation measures if trees have to be removed. And that's it. We're going to go through all of that. And so see you next Saturday. Contact me if you want the agenda and the Zoom link. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Joanne. I know we're over time, so I'm going to be super quick. Our next meeting is April 10th, and I'm hoping it will be a forum for candidates for council district elections. So stay tuned. I'm going to see if we can make that happen. Any other announcements from anybody else? Oh, and the evaluation. I keep forgetting to put the evaluation link back in, so I'll try to do that right now. So please complete the evaluation if you can. Glenn, go for it.
Thanks. Speaking of candidate forums, the Neighborhood Council Budget Advocates are doing one for City Controller on that same day, but fortunately earlier. So Sunday, April 10th at 3 p.m. Okay. The 7 candidates for City Controller have confirmed. Part of the reason, obviously, Budget Advocates focus the city's tracking the city's money, and the current controller has done a great job of transparency. So we want to make sure that's continued. The other thing I would just want to mention for those of you who are neighborhood council folks, it came up in last week's Board of Neighborhood Commissioners meeting that the governor's executive order that allows neighborhood councils to meet virtually expires April 1st. And they're sort of at a loss to know, part of it's out of their hands. But I just want to give everyone who's involved with the neighborhood council, just be aware that it's possible that neighborhood councils will have no choice but to meet in person starting April 1st if nothing changes, if the executive order is not renewed, or if the city and county is superseded by the state levels. So, and also in the monthly update that neighborhood council board members just got this month, it does ask neighborhood councils if they want to the Zoom accounts are going to expire next month that the city is providing. And they're asking the neighborhood councils to agendize and let them know if they want to continue their Zoom accounts. So I just want to bring that to everyone's attention, that if you have that interest for, it may not be able to be used for your board meetings, but there may be other things like, you know, community meetings, town halls, things like that, that could be useful. Thank you.
Interesting. Wow. Thank you. Anybody else? Jian?
I just want to uplift that many in the disability community, rights community are advocating for hybrid options because of equity issues. And that's always been an issue, but it was kind of alleviated because of the pandemic. And I personally would like folks with disabilities and folks who are immunocompromised to be able to participate.
All right, thank you. And Glenn, was your, okay, I think we're done with announcements. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for hanging in there, and thanks for all your hard work and your passion and your engagement and your support, and to be continued. And Nish, I guess we'll see you soon. Good night, everybody.
I'll reach out to you and
Good night, everybody.
Yeah, well, we can figure it out between among the three of us.
Night.
Guten Abend.
thank you.
Guten Abend, Shabbat Shalom, Shalom. להתראות, alamaco.
Happy spring, everybody, next week.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, spring. Oh, wow.
And we lost an hour of sleep last night. Huh?
Anybody
I
find
sure
it yet?
did.
We did lose the hour last night, didn't we?
Yeah,
We
we lost
did.
an hour last night.
So I was going off my oven clock all day today, and then I looked at my phone and realized I was late for the meeting. Lisa, since we're on still, in light of the zero carbon, whether it's for advocacy or this meeting, that low carbon initiative, and